Welcome back to Radio Entrepreneurs. I'm Jonathan Freedman, and our next guest is Christopher Wick, founder of Say Yes! Exclamation point Enterprises. Christopher, welcome back to Radio Entrepreneurs.
Thank you so much for having me on again.
So it's always great to have somebody come back and update us on what's going on and how their businesses are evolving and flourishing. Why don't you start by telling us a little bit about what your business is and what you do?
Absolutely. So Say Yes Enterprises is a sell-side M&A advisory firm, which is basically a lot of words to say, I help people sell their businesses. And one of the reasons I wanted to come back on the show is the statistics of people being able to successfully sell have actually decreased in probability. So I'm talking a lot about how 92% of business owners do not have a sellable business. And that's up from last year's number of 85%. So the market is tightening, but today I want to share how they can solve it and that there's light at the end of the tunnel.
So that's a pretty staggering statistic. So 92% of businesses that is that statistic that you cite based on businesses that are actively trying to sell a business, or is that looking at business in totality?
Yeah, so it's in totality because when they go to list, whether with an advisor or with a broker or on a website where they can buy and sell, or even asking friends, families, competitors, once they list, the chances of them being able to be sold is less than 85% of that's it's less than a 15% chance of success. So in totality, 92% of Americans in our country don't have a sellable business. And it really comes down to three core areas. There's like three major problems that you want to solve in order to have a sellable business that you can bank on later.
And it's really staggering because so much of people's net worth is tied up in their businesses, and without the opportunity for an exit, you spend all this time, in many cases, years and perhaps generations building those businesses, and then that proverbial pot of gold never materializes because their businesses are not sellable. So it's a significant problem for ultimate wealth generation and wealth preservation.
Yeah, 100%. And you brought up an excellent point. When most of people have their net worth tied up in their business, there's a diversification problem. Just like you wouldn't have 90% of your net worth in one individual stock, to have so much of our worth tied up in our businesses is a huge liability to being financially free and successful. And what's really cool is now, we spoke earlier about what's great about coming back on podcasts is the evolution and people growing. Where we are in our society today is we have more entrepreneurs than we have ever had before in human history. And that's amazing. And with that has come a challenge that most people aren't designed to know how to save for their future, how to make sure they have something they can bank on because they're solving today's problems, which is getting more sales, getting more clients. But then there's going to come a time where they reach the end of the road and due to age or desire in the business or what they're doing in their life. And then they realize they've spent years learning how to grow their business, but they didn't spend any time learning how to exit their business. But the good news is there's people like me that help people with that. And whether you have prepared or whether you haven't, as an advisor, I'm able to come in and help you sell for maximum value.
It's really interesting because I think the other piece that I've seen is there's often a complete disconnect, and I know you want to touch on this, a complete disconnect in perceived value from actual value, and it's quite interesting that in the world of business sales, mergers and acquisitions, and representing a business, that there are so many different ways to value a business and to approach it in terms of looking at what that value may be. It's very different than a traditional retail transaction or a home value where you look at a couple of comps. It's much more shrouded and nuanced in the world of selling a business. That there is a range of value usually. And value is different depending on who the potential acquirer is. In other words, that some acquirers may have place a premium value because acquiring the business allows them to do something that they can do easier because they've acquired this business or more effectively or scale it or whatever it may be. So that synergy of acquiring a business. So it's obviously very nuanced, and that's why people like you exist to help navigate through this and provide sellers with guidance in how to do that. I think people are often, scratch their heads and go, why do I need somebody to help me? I can just do it myself. I've gotten, 100 phone calls from potential acquirers. Everybody wants to buy my business. So tell us why that's a not a great approach to take.
Yeah, well, you're right on the money. I explain selling your business to selling your home all the time. It's easy to sell your home because we have comps. Unfortunately, in buying and selling businesses, we don't have comps, we only have formulas. And so when someone is reviewing the opportunity to sell their business, one of the dangerous things is going about alone. And I speak from experience. My first really big exit was when I was 31 years old. And I was really excited to do this exit. It was the largest transaction I'd ever done in my career. And being a scrappy entrepreneur and being a self-starter and a self-made guy, I thought I'll just do it myself. But then I soon realized, wait, this is the biggest transaction of my life. I'm way too emotionally attached because my clients, my staff, my babies, and I want to make sure I'm represented well. So I had an advisor during that time period. So I don't just, talk the talk, I walk the walk because in my most important transactions, I hire counsel because there's two mistakes that happen when you go into your business representing yourself. Number one, you are way too close to the situation. You're way too close to the clients, the staff, the negotiations, the excitement of being able to sell, the despair if you can't. So there's way too much emotion tied into it. And you really need a buffer where someone comes in as an advisor and they're, cool as a cucumber. I tell my clients, I'm like stable Mabel. Nothing rocks me because I'm here. I've done this over 100 times. I will do it over 100 times again. There's nothing that's going to scare me in negotiation. There's nothing that's going to kill a deal from an emotional perspective. The second reason why you don't want to represent yourself in a sale is you're actually not going to get as good of a purchase price. So some people's objection is I can do this myself. Why would I give a percentage to an advisor? And the answer is yeah, you might be able to save a little bit of money on the success share that you're going to invest in the advisor negotiating on your behalf. But how much could you gain? And a really good example of this is one of my clients last month. I was in the middle, I came in the middle of the negotiation. And so once they had received an offer, is when my client started reaching out and looking for help from advisors. And what was amazing is this client got an amazing life-changing offer. They're already planning how they're going to spend it, invest it. And I said, we are not going to take this. We need $2 million more. And so what's amazing is in less than 14 days, we were able to get over $2 million more, which pays for the success share time and time over again. And so when you're doing your own business evaluation and you want to go to the market and sell, you really want to make sure, one, that you have a third party unbiased perspective on your deal and an advisor. And then number two, that you have the leverage of negotiating a strong purchase price. Because even if you think it's good, one, it could likely be better. But two, just because someone has made an offer doesn't mean that it will go through.
It's fantastic. Great advice. I would add one other element that I've often seen is I think people don't recognize the amount of effort and the time that goes into getting a deal from that even to an offer stage. But once you get to the offer stage to a closing, and what I've seen often could derail a deal is that while you're spending all of that time and effort, your business is now taking a nosedive, and you look at it and say, "Whoa, wait a minute, we're not buying what we thought we're buying because the leader has taken their eye off the ball, and sales have taken a nosedive, or some other operational blip has hit." And so that investment in that third party to invest that time allows you to maintain your focus and your energy on continuing that trajectory that's brought you success or brought you to the table in the first place.
Yes, 100%. It is a full-time job to sell your business. And a really great example is I'm in the middle of a transaction right now representing one of my sellers. We listed on a Tuesday afternoon, and by Friday, they had over 21 prospective buyers, and two of them were preparing an offer. That doesn't happen on accident. It happens because Every single person that reaches out, I call, text, email. I start doing introduction calls. I start learning about them and their life story. So, can you imagine being a business owner and from Tuesday afternoon to Friday, you've had over 21 conversations learning about people's life stories, why they want to invest, what they're looking for? It's just impossible. And then let's say you get one, and let's say Susie Q is really excited to buy your business. So then you spend all your time on Susie Q only to find out she's changed her mind and she's not going to do the deal. And then you've got to call the 19, 20 other people to now talk with them. I mean, it's a full-time role. And so the best thing that someone can do when they're preparing to sell is continue to work on their business and just get us everything we need as far as documentation, answers to questions, but making sure you're putting your best foot forward, because just like when you show your home and you're about to sell, you make sure everything's clean, beautiful, decorated. You want to do the same thing with your business. You want to put your best foot forward so you can have a great transaction.
Absolutely. Great guidance, great advice. One of the things that we didn't cite within, but it's a subset of the number that you talk about. How many businesses get to that point where they think a deal is going to get consummated, and then for some reason the rug is pulled out? The phrase that often comes back to me is, don't spend the money until it's cleared the bank. And very often deals fall apart at the last minute for a multitude of reasons. And so, making sure that you have somebody to guide you and work you through. And, when it does hit the fan, your cool, calm, collected negotiator is working on your behalf.
100%. Because when you're doing a deal, it is very emotional, not just for you as the seller, it's also very emotional for the buyer. What I see our buyers do, and I have felt this way too. I've done almost 40 personal acquisitions in addition to helping my clients, but there's something called deal heat, which is where you're engaged, you're excited, you've got this new investment you want to make, but then something comes along and you fall out of love with the deal. And you fall out of love, and then something scares you or there's a red flag. And that's where you have to have the third party that's cool as a cucumber, stable and able to say, let's resurrect this deal. Let's make sure we don't lose it. Because here is the stats of what happens. So when someone goes to sell their business, we already know over 85% of the time, once they've listed, they will not sell. Let's say they're working with an advisor. When we get a letter of intent, which is a formal offer to buy a business, when that letter of intent comes in, you have a 50 to a 75% chance of that deal closing. Those are really good odds because now we finally got an offer, but that also means there's 25 to 50% chance you could screw it up, but we don't want to do that. Then when we have a purchase agreement, and finally we're now, crossing our T's and dotting our I's and we're putting together a purchase agreement, there's about a 95% chance the deal is going to go through, but that also represents a 5% chance it won't go through, which means there's a 5% chance all this time we've spent with this one particular buyer may not be successful. And so it is definitely an adventure to go on. I would say a journey, but then that would allude to people thinking that happens in a very long time frame. I've sold businesses in as quick as an afternoon because I make a phone call to a buyer. And then sometimes it's taken, we had a deal this last quarter that took 4.5 months because the seller was not reasonable with the purchase price they wanted to list at. So typically between 1 day and 4 months, we can get your deal done.
Fantastic. Our guest has been Christopher Wick, founder of Say Yes Enterprises. Christopher, if people want to reach out to you, talk about their particular situations, or learn more about you and your process, what's the best way for them to do that?
The best way for that is to go to sayyesenterprises.com, and we have a free business valuation we give out to any of your listeners. It's completely free. There's nothing to be sold, no upsell. We want to show you what your business is worth and how much you could sell for today and what you might be leaving on the table.
Fantastic. Our guest has been Christopher Wick, founder of Say Yes Enterprises. It's been a pleasure having you on Radio Entrepreneurs.
Thank you.
And we'll be right back with another segment on Radio Entrepreneurs.